Hello and welcome to New Game Plus. I'm Tim. I'm joined by Kirsty. How are you?
I'm feeling very good. It's been a very interesting week in gaming, I think, this week. We've got a couple of really strong reviews for games that, well, obviously one of them I've been playing.
Yeah.
But I'm actually really interested to play The Order 1886.
Yes. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the Order and how it represents modern gaming, I guess, is the word for it.
I think there's been a lot of arguments about like the story-driven aspect of it, the fact that it is so story-heavy. And it's actually been funny seeing a lot of people compare Hideo Kojima games like Metal Gear Solid versus 1886, and it's the old argument of it's okay if Hideo Kojima does it.
Yeah.
And it's like, So
I think there's still room in modern gaming for story-driven games. You just look at games like The Last of Us. Fantastic. So it can be done well, but I think we'll find out later in the episode whether The Order is done well.
Exactly. But we also have some great serious business stuff coming through in the middle of the episode. We've got Gerard talking to a copyright lawyer.
And copyright is something very interesting when it comes to online gaming as well as
digital distribution and rights, and obviously use of like Flappy Bird. Remember how funny was that? In the background. So we got that coming up for you in the middle of the episode. Very exciting. But of course,
Majora's Mask.
Baby. Yeah. So I'm so into this game at the moment. It's just that moon. Yeah. That moon haunts me so violently. Like it's I don't know how to even explain. Like I was watching the opening sequence. Yeah. And I showed my brother, and now we didn't play Majora's Mask much together. We played Ocarina of Time together. And he just watched. I said, don't look too closely because you won't sleep. Because it's just, even the opening sequence when you open your 3DS gives you the...
You can't go out at night because you're just fearful of the moon.
I know, it freaks me out. But, oh well, look, let's see what happens in our first review.
Now, it's always hard to walk into the Zelda community and say, hey guys, which one's your favourite? Because 9 times out of 10, the answer is Ocarina of Time.
And that's where this game comes in, of course, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which came after Ocarina of Time and at the time didn't necessarily live up to the same hype.
Well, not the same hype, but the same standard. As far as I was concerned, I was 15, I loved the game, I played it through, I got all the masks, the whole shebang. So, for me, to come back to this game, I had to really fight the nostalgia angle and see if it really did continue to be a good game or whether it was just me playing the nostalgia kit.
And see, that's where I came in because I never played Majora's Mask when it first came out. So this was a whole new experience for me. Plus I played it on the older 3DS. So I actually had the smaller screen, didn't have the second Circle Pad Pro working either. So I also had a different game experience as well.
But when it's all said and done, the big difference between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask is the fact that you're on a limited clock in Majora's Mask. Basically, you get cursed, the moon's falling on the world.
And that is the creepiest thing in the world, by the way. Can I just say that? That gave me nightmares.
Yeah, and so it's basically you end up replaying the same 72 hours of gameplay over and over again. The idea is that you reset the time with your ocarina / whatever musical instrument comes out of you, and you redo it again, and you redo it again. And the idea is you basically want to do it till you get to the perfect run, you've unlocked all the masks, and then you go finish the game. So if you like Dead Rising, if you like Groundhog Day, it's far more akin to that style of a game / experience.
And the thing I liked as well, it's still a Legend of Zelda game, it still encourages exploration, but the time limit makes it so much more difficult, and I liked that difficulty edge.
And you'll also find the fact that you'll just do some things in like a real quick amount of time, just to get the mask or just to get whatever, and then just reset. So that is probably the big gameplay difference. But I think stylistically, I liked it more. It was darker, it was creepier.
There was a brutality to this game, like even just, the masks were creepy. So, I mean, even every time the Skull Kid turned up, you're like, the shivers. So there was an expression in it.
Yeah, so I feel that even though as perhaps a larger experience, it wasn't quite as polished, it tried to do more. They had a little bit more, I don't want to say fun, but a little more creative input in it. And I think as a result, it still works. As a game, it still works compared to my 15-year-old self. How did you find it as a new player?
As a new player, I really enjoyed it. I think I needed it on a bigger screen because it was such a beautiful world. I would like to see it on the television, but it did work as a 3DS game just with the switching back and forward in time.
Now, don't nod, we're a great little studio that brought out a diamond in the rough game called Remember Me, which was, are you agreeing? Or
you told me not to nod.
Okay, is that okay, right. You liked Remember Me as well, I take it, but it was a flawed game, let's be honest.
Yeah, it was a flawed game. It did have its issues, particularly the combat as well as the platforming. I don't think it's Don't Nod's forte. So I found it a bit of a surprise considering they're going to focus on their strengths of what was good in Remember Me and carry it over with Life is Strange.
Which is a third-person game again, but it's far more around, I guess, almost a point-and-click kind of like idea behind it.
It's definitely narrative focused. So the story goes, you play as Max, who is an aspiring yet troubled schoolgirl / photography student. She struggles to find her place within society, as with all teenagers do, which is something I can definitely relate to because I'm 14 years of age. But it is a fairly convincing tale of growing up, especially with this newfound power of being able to rewind time and right the wrongs that she once came across. So
Jonathan Blow was consulting on this one, and he gave her braid rewind.
Well, a little bit, but the character is actually just as interesting. The way you look at it, it has this very strange, like Groundhog Day, influenced by the Sliders kind of appeal. So Max has this power she comes in contact with. She manages to save a few lives along the way and help people out. She rewinds time, goes back into the near past, manages to right wrongs, such as someone has a gun and is pointing at someone. So she ends up finding a fire alarm, activating it, and then saving that person's life, and obviously them taking advantage of the situation.
So it really is an extension of the work they did with the memory rewriting in Remember Me.
That's what I mentioned before about what made Remember Me good, and they've managed to capitalize it with this. And it's great. Like, if you don't mind a little bit of slow pacing, I mean, it's an episodic series. It takes a while for it to get into it. You'll find a very convincing tale of growing up and just fantastic characters.
Hello and welcome to another in New Game Plus, a series of serious business where we look at serious issues concerning gamers. Now, I know a lot of indie developers watch our show, and anybody else that's watching the show that has a dream of one day becoming a game developer will be interested in. Today I'm talking to Victor, an IP lawyer from Markwell. Hello Victor, thanks for joining us.
G'day Jared, thanks very much.
No worries. Now look, let's start with a game. Now there's been a few issues over the last few years, high profile trademark disputes and things like that. When we're talking copyright with respect to a game, how does that work? What's that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a really good question because copyright in games in particular is actually a really broad, really big topic. There's no such thing as copyright in a game as a whole, but a game has so many different elements that have copyright protection over them, that, or capable of copyright protection, that actually it's quite a IP-rich sort of subject. So in a game, you've got the code, obviously, which is protected by copyright as a piece of writing. You've got the artwork. So if there's characters that you've had graphic artists create, there's artwork which is separately protected as a work of art. Then you've got things like music, and in music you have copyright in the lyrics, separate to the copyright in the composition, separate to the copyright in the actual recording of the music. And on top of all of that, you've also got things like copyright in when the game's actually viewed. That might be copyright in a film. So in this one thing which you call a game, there's all these multiple sort of copyrights sitting there, which developers need to be aware of.
So if I've decided, say hypothetically, myself and my friends have got this great idea, we're going to make millions of dollars, we've got an indie game idea, maybe it's a chicken crossing a road sort of thing or something, or bird jumping between pylons. Now, obviously everybody starts out happy and all friendly and that, but sometimes things do go astray, and there's been recently a high profile accusation of somebody using a code or an idea. Now, can I copyright an idea or a concept for a game if I've come up with a great idea?
The strict legal answer is no. You can't protect an idea. So there's it's in the long history of IP. It's a founding principle that you can't protect an idea because people should be able to go out and be novel and inventive and take an idea and sort of do different things with it. So you can't protect the idea of a game or the concept of a game. You can protect the game or the elements of the game once it's actually been created.
So the look and feel of the game, how it works, how the controls work, that sort of thing?
Well, to a degree, it's more the things like copyright looks at, is a sort of hard IP that looks at, is it a written work, is it an artwork, is it code, which is written work as well. The look and feel, in terms of artwork, it could be. But you can to some degree protect an idea or a concept through things such as an NDA, a confidentiality agreement. So in effect, where IP falls over and says you can't protect this idea or this great concept you've got, but you don't want to go and talk to someone and then possibly lose that idea to someone else. The way to deal with it is to create rights, I guess, where IP says you don't have rights. You create rights through contract by agreeing with someone that I'm going to share this idea with you, but you can't take it
and make it yourself.
Make it yourself.
Because one of the fears would be, and you see it a lot, you've come up with this great idea, you've made a game, and look, Candy Crush is a big one for this in the Windows Store. There's a lot of other Candy Crushes. Flappy Bird, there's a heap of Flappy Bird clones. I don't think that matters too much though. Crossy Road already has a clone on the Windows App Store. And not an official version. Now, if that sort of stuff happens, I've made my game, I've put it onto iOS or Android or both, and suddenly there's copies everywhere. Is that just one of those things that's really difficult to address afterwards?
Yeah, it can be difficult because again, there's that argument that sure you had the original concept, and you created a game out of it, but other people might have the same concept. They're not complex games in terms of gameplay.
Yeah.
So if they haven't copied the images, if they haven't copied the code, then there's probably no copyright infringement. Now, the practical things you can do is to get there first, obviously.
Get on the other app stores.
Get on the other app stores.
Developers, get in the other app stores. Don't ignore.
Even though they've got small market share, if it's business is business, you want to be on there.
Yeah. But it's your money or somebody else's.
That's right.
Gets it. Yeah. So. No, fair enough. Now, with so it sounds like a bit of a minefield with trying to protect your stuff, and it actually sounds a bit like you kind of can't in a way. If a group of developers is going to start out, now it's like getting married. Nobody wants to turn up to their new partner with a prenup because you look like a prick. But realistically, if you've got a bunch of friends, they're working on a game, things never go smooth. What should people do?
Yeah. That's a really good comparison, I think, because I'm sure there's lots of people who entered into marriage and said, we don't want a prenup because that's kind of a bit strange.
Oh, we love each other.
That's right. And then, now, and then at the end of the day, it gets even more complicated. So I think, if you're getting together with a bunch of friends, you need to take that lesson. You're not going to get married with them, but you've got to take that lesson and say, well, let's agree now how we're going to work together. And you don't need to run off and see a lawyer straight away. It may be a good idea. Ultimately, if you're viewing it as a business, if you're in this as a business, then you should probably treat it as such. But really simple things. So there's a group of you wanting to do something together. Agree on how things are going to work. And the three things I usually say to think about is what happens with the money. How does money in, money out? How does all that work?
I don't think they make a lot of that.
And then if they do, that's when you might find that agreements might help them at the start. The second thing to think about is rights as well. Who owns what, or is it jointly owned? Can be a minefield. Or how is it jointly owned? And then the third thing is, and what happens if you want that divorce? What happens if you want to break up? What if I don't want to do this anymore? Or what if you don't want me to do this anymore? How do we work out the exit? And those three things really is where you'll find most disagreements or most complexities arise. Is how does the money work? Who owns what? And what happens now that we want to separate?
And it's not fun, but
it's not fun, but something that you probably need to work out at the start. And it's not necessarily a 300-page contract that everyone has to get independent legal advice on. But you break it down to the basics. What do you want to happen, guys?
So there's a lot to. So the idea of just sitting in a garage or a room in a house somewhere and just hacking away at a wonderful new game that's going to change the world seems a little bit more complex than just a couple of programmers or a designer and a music person or friends. Bit of advice need to be got?
Look, I think it is complex, and it is important, I think, to know a little bit about that complexity. I think it's great for people to collaborate and get together and work on stuff together. I'm not suggesting that everyone should go out and get hire a lawyer every time they have a great idea for a game, but I think it's
not cheap.
It certainly is really useful to have some of that knowledge yourself, and from there you're just aware of stuff. Often I say to people, the most important thing is not necessarily really locking down all your IP. It is important if you want to sort of commercialise.
Yep.
But at the early stages, just being IP aware, being aware of copyright, being aware of trademarks. Can I use this name? Can't I use this name?
And what happens if things go wrong?
That's right. Can I use this piece of music that I found off the internet or not?
Yep.
Being aware of
probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Yep.
Being aware of that sort of stuff is really important. Even if you're just sitting in your garage, coding away.
Cool. Oh, thank you very much, Victor. Now, that's for anybody who wants to make a game. There's professional organisations like the IGDA that can probably also help out a lot with that. But be aware, you've got your idea for your game. There's a lot to consider. We don't want to discourage it because we need a lot more game developers. That makes a lot of wide, diverse range of games, a lot of creativity. Get stuck into it, but be aware there's a few things you might have to look out for.
It started with a meeting. Everyone was there. Scarecrow said he had a plan, that together we could take you out. And Gotham would be ours.
Over my dead body.
I believe that was the idea.
Remnants of Gotham, I have messages for you all. To the vandals who stayed behind to pick the still warm flesh from Gotham's bones, have your fun. You are under my protection. To the cowards quaking behind the police department's walls, you will not be spared. And to Batman, I have already won. Emptied your city with a vial of toxin and a few threatening words. That's how little the safety you provided was worth. And when the dawn comes, when Gotham lies in ruin and I turn my gaze to the world beyond, the legend of the Batman will be worth nothing at all.
Now, one thing I've always, or I used to do with some of the earlier Arkham games, was compare it a bit to Assassin's Creed. So it was, like the air assassinations, just the feel of the game. But the longer the series has gone on, the less I'm drawing that comparison.
Yeah, it becomes more of its own thing.
It has become more of its own thing, but to me, it's also become very dark.
Yeah.
And I like the Assassin's Creed games because there's generally a bit of lightheartedness to it. This is kind of actually scaring me, how dark this series has become, which is great because obviously then storytelling in games is really progressing beyond the flowery happy endings.
Yeah.
But it is very grim.
It certainly looks like they're bringing a lot of villains from the Batman universe. Usually there's like one central villain and they have a couple of extra ones. But I mean, just the highlights of that trailer there, so many good villains in there. Hopefully they get some good voice actors in there and really bring Batman to life again. Because Rocksteady, fantastic studio.
True. My concern is by having too many villains, will these villains be a bit too two-dimensional? Do you know what I mean? Like there's not enough time to develop a story. At least over the previous games, like even with the Riddler parts, that helped develop the character. But if you've got all of these dudes, it could be interesting. It could be these dudes battling out for domination in the end because they're all mad. Or what characterization, what kind of meatiness of characterization will I get out of the villains, not just Batman himself?
Yeah, and Rocksteady bring this new Batman Arkham Knight, a really big focus on the Batmobile. So we'll see how that plays in as well, and hopefully the driving is very good as well.
Time is a strange thing, isn't it, Matt? Hours can either go by in an instant or just drag on forever. The past, present, and future can all clash together at once, and no more are these time paradoxes more prevalent than Sony's new third-person cover-based shooter, The Order 1886. So we should just start with the most obvious part, the setting, right, Matt?
Yes, so the setting, just like the title describes, the game is set in 1886, and it focuses on an unknown force known as the Half-Breeds, which is like a cross between vampires and humanoids.
Yeah.
And it does concern itself with a high societal military-esque team known as the Knights. And they have this huge creed called the Order, and they concern themselves with hunting down these beasts for the good of mankind.
Yes, the titular order, if you will.
Yes.
And the setting, it seems to be interesting, but the game doesn't really follow through with its potential. Like, it just suddenly throws in almost Twilight-esque vampire and werewolf tropes.
And the characterization isn't really good either. I mean, you follow the tale of Galahad, which is the person you play as mostly in the game. Is not a very concerning or redeemable character in any sense, and whatever stuff happens to him just seems very circumstantial, doesn't seem to hold much weight.
And even then, you just don't care about it, really.
But stuff we do care though, and we're going to be a little bit iffy about this as well, the visuals. Now, the setting, the visuals, everything from the art design, the production values is absolutely superb. You take a look at this game and you think, bam, this is what the PlayStation 4 can do. This is next gen.
This is the future we are looking at, yes.
Yes.
But
that's
the game
set in the past, in the future.
See, paradoxes.
Yes.
But the thing is though, the game almost knows that it looks spectacular, and it's very keen to remind you of this fact. You're walking incredibly slowly through hallways in the first part. The game often stops to make you inspect its pretty textures. Hey, look at this gun we made. Hey, look at this apple. Hey, look at this box of tea that we made.
I have to admit, that apple was really nicely rendered.
Oh, it was sumptuous
the shine
though.
on that apple, goodness, that skin. Oh, I feel like an apple now.
But we mentioned the guns though, but
yes,
because this is ultimately, at the end of the day, a third-person cover shooter, but even then it's almost an ineffectual one. It just feels like its mechanics are trapped in the last generation.
And I know it's hard to do so, but it really, especially for a third-person shooter, but it really doesn't have an identity of its own. A lot of the mechanics, including stealth and cover, a lot of games have already done better, so it doesn't really have an advantage over anything.
And a lot of games have handled length better as well, because the big controversy is that the game's only 5 hours long. The game's actually more like 6 to 8 hours, but even then, those hours just drag on because the game is so poorly paced. As I said, you're walking slowly a lot in the first half. And even the later half, when combat does kick in, the combat situations feel like they go on for an eternity.
As you said, that is a major point of contention, especially for Xbox fans who might have gotten a bit sick about all the Sony heckling about Rise. This is the PlayStation 4 version of Rise. So if you wanted to get one back from the Sony fans, go for it, guys.
This honestly does feel like a PlayStation 4 launch title, or that it should have been one.
Agreed.
Now this is Sony's big PS4 title, and to see it, people not really enjoying it is interesting.
It's very interesting. Now, I have to say, The Order 1886 certainly was the game that caught my eye at the E3 press conferences and stuff. I thought, man, this is great. I'm a big kind of, not a Victorian buff, but I'm really interested in the fashion, the style, the aesthetic, the language.
The gruff British gentleman.
With the lovely handlebar mustaches and the coif of curls pointing to one side. Oh, the slick, oh, just stop. But I love that. So I was really excited to see them create a, maybe not authentic, but how are they going to create that universe? How are they going to infer the language? If they're having women fighters, how are they going to incorporate the fashion? So visually, I was very interested in this game.
Certainly atmospheric, but the atmosphere can only do so much
it's
when
still
the
a game.
gameplay is
not
maybe a bit lacking. So
exactly. So that was the kind of disappointing part, I suppose. And here we go, the comparisons with Metal Gear Solid, but it's still, it wasn't enough. I think there's so much you could do with that. Like, there's so much you could do with that kind of setting, and it's just may not happen. But it's a very good indication about what they can do in the future. Like, if this is how beautiful they can make a game, and looking into the past for
and story-driven games as well. It's really I'm looking forward to more story-driven games, just because there's great examples like Last of Us.
Exactly.
To show that it can be done. Not everything needs to be an open-world game where there's no direction. You can just bum around for 50 hours or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of maybe not bumming around for 50 hours, next week we've got our big review of Monster Hunter.
Yes, very exciting.
People sinking some serious hours into that.
Yeah, as well as Dying Light, so some fast zombies in the night.
Yes.
Look forward to that.
Yes, I'm kind of scared now. But yes, anyway, thank you so much, Timmy. We should probably wrap it up.
So visit our website, www.newgameplus.tv.
Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/NewGamePlusTV.
Follow our Twitter and Instagram at NewGamePlusTV.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/NewGamePlusTV.
And follow our Twitch, twitch.tv/NewGamePlusTV.
Yay, thank you so much, Timmy.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next week.